And stations coming up on 90 seconds until the launch of hour number 1 of The Line of Fire with Dr. Michael Brown, Salem Radio Networks channel SR2. 90 seconds from Mark. 90 seconds. And stations, it's now 1 minute before the start of hour number 1 of The Line of Fire with Dr. Michael Brown. 1 minute from Mark. 1 minute. And stations now the final time check before the start of hour number 1 of The Line of Fire with Dr. Michael Brown. 30 seconds until hour number 1 from Mark. That was our final verbal time check for The Line of Fire with Dr. Michael Brown. We'll have a long tone at 10 seconds before, followed by a short one at 5 seconds. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Phone lines are wide open. You've got questions. We've got answers.
It's time for The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Michael Brown is the director of the Coalition of Conscience and president of Fire School of Ministry. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
You know, time it is. You've got questions. We've got answers. It is Friday on The Line of Fire. Michael Brown, delighted to be with you. Phone lines now open, 866-34-TRUTH, 866-348-7884. Whatever you're wondering about, whatever's on your mind, any way that I can help you, anything in any area of expertise I have, by all means, give me a call. If you would like me to comment on the history of the scientific understanding of the development of the earthworm, sorry, just not in my areas of expertise. So there are things that I can't help you with. But if there are, by all means, give me a call, 866-34-TRUTH. If you differ with me on any points, you can call in spiritually, theologically, biblically, culturally, politically, having to do with Israel and the Jewish people. Questions, calls, comments are warmly welcome. Also this weekend, special Israel conference, First Things Restoration Conference, Paul Wilbur leading in worship, a special concert. So that's going to be through this weekend, tonight, Friday night, Saturday morning, evening, Sunday morning, evening. The details on my website, AskDrBrown.org. Just check on itinerary. All right, we go to David in Washington. Welcome to The Line of Fire.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for letting me ask my question.
Yes, sir.
It's based on Galatians chapter 1, verses 6 through 9, as pertaining to hypergrace. It's a three-part question, if you allow me to ask it.
Sure.
Are those that adhere to the hypergrace message considered currently removing themselves from him that called them into the grace of Christ? And if so, is the hypergrace message another gospel, one other than what the apostles preached? And are those that preach it considered perverting the gospel and are therefore anathema?
Yes, sir. Thank you for asking the question so clearly. Some are. In other words, some have departed from the truth of the gospel. Some have so distorted the gospel with hypergrace teaching that they now preach universalism, that they now preach that as you sin, that you now make sinful things holy. In other words, they have completely distorted the gospel. What they are saying is not the gospel. They are not within the body, and they are leading others to hell with them. In its most extreme forms, yes, that is the case. However, the great majority of people that I researched in my book, Hypergrace, are brothers and sisters in the Lord with the wrong emphasis, or who take a good emphasis too far, or who leave out other things that are important. So they do preach the fundamentals of the faith in terms of salvation through the cross, and they do teach that the gospel empowers us to live above sin. But then along with that, there are serious errors that can lead people astray or hurt them in their walk. But as I spent a couple hours with Joseph Prince, as I've interacted with others that I quote in my book, although we have differences, I recognize them as brothers and sisters in the Lord that are saved by the same blood that we're saved by, and that also believe that sin is destructive and wrong, and that God's grace empowers us to live above sin. But as I said, there are other wrong, dangerous elements in the teaching, because of which I don't call it counterfeit grace. That to me would be heresy. Rather, hyper grace, an exaggeration of something good.
It seemed like you did call it counterfeit grace in your book, It's Time to Rock the Boat, many years ago.
Well, I wasn't talking about this. In those days, I wasn't talking about this specific subject of hyper grace because I didn't even hear it taught back then. There were some of the distinctives of hyper grace today I didn't hear taught 25, 30 years ago. And It's Time to Rock the Boat came out in 1993. Yeah, but the counterfeit grace that tells you no matter how much you sin, it's not going to affect your relationship with God. Yeah, that's terribly dangerous. And there's some elements of that that can be in hyper grace, but the overall emphasis of hyper grace doesn't say that. In other words, when Joseph Prince drew up a list of everything that he called counterfeit grace, he said, I reject that. Well, I reject that as well. And then he said, here's what I affirm. Well, I affirm those things too. So where would you see a contradiction, sir?
Oh, I just thought it paralleled. I thought it just seemed like before the phrase hyper grace was coined, that's what you were talking about in that book.
Oh, no, thank you
My
for...
second concern is...
Yeah. So just
the leaven the whole lump.
Right. So just to explain, David, there is overlap between what I was addressing in It's Time to Rock the Boat and what I am dealing with in hyper grace, but they're not identical. So at what point does a little leaven the whole lump? When it does exactly that. In other words, when the fruit that it produces is the fruit of a cult or the fruit of deception or the fruit of disqualifying someone from being in the kingdom of God. So if the persistent fruit of hyper grace was backsliding, destruction, apostasy, then I would say it is counterfeit grace and it has leavened the whole lump. When I hear of many who have had their lives transformed, who love the Lord more than ever, who are spending more time with Him in prayer, who have been set free from various addictions, and I see a lot of good fruit, then I see people are hearing the good part of the message. I remember a guy sending me a note on Twitter and saying, I'm thinking of buying your book, Hyper Grace, but listening to Joseph Prince, I got set free from years of alcohol addiction. Is your book going to put me back the old way? I said, no, my book will reinforce the good parts of what he was saying. David, very important questions. And thank you so much for calling and for asking. 866-34-TRUTH. By the way, the earlier that you call in, the better chance I have of getting to your calls. So now's a great time to call in. It's rare on a Friday we have any open lines, but we do right now. So earlier you call in, better chance we have of getting to you. Let's go to Eugene in Oklahoma. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Brown. I appreciate your ministry, sir.
Sure thing.
Yes, sir. So my question is in regards to the motivation behind the cross. And I was watching a film called The American Gospel, and I'm not Reformed, and I'm not too sure of what you think about Todd White, but they basically tried to condemn him and others who hold to this view of saying that the motivation behind Jesus dying on the cross is the fact that he loved his creation. And I guess the way they teach it is by saying that we in and of ourselves are valuable, therefore God died for us, while the Reformed community, it's a little bit different. They believe that the motivation for God dying for his people is not found in people, but it's only found in him. In other words, he wanted to show how good he was by having mercy upon his children and for giving his life for his children. And I'm a little bit confused. I don't really know what perspective is correct. I see truth in both of them almost. And also, do you think that if anyone held to a view that Todd White has regarding the cross, do you believe that's worthy of condemning them to hell? Because I think that community is somewhat quick to do that to a lot of people they have theological difference with, sir.
Number one, if you believe that Jesus died for us because he saw us as valuable and precious and important, and that was part of it, is that something to be condemned to hell for? No, of course not. Absolutely, categorically not. So look, when you are looking at the larger charismatic world, often there's an error among charismatics that they can be too open, too broad, too accepting of too many things, and thereby fall into deception. When you look at the non-charismatic world, especially in its reformed aspects, what you often have is they can be too closed, too narrow, and therefore rejecting good things that the Spirit of God is doing. So there are extremes on both sides. But no, there's nothing damnable about believing that. So yes, we understand that in and of ourselves, there is nothing worthy, deserving of the love of God. And I imagine Todd White would say that. I've only spent a few hours with him, so I can't say beyond that. But we understand that we all deserve damnation, that we're all under the sentence of God's wrath, and if he condemned us, it would be right and fair and good, and he doesn't have to apologize for judging us because that's what we deserve. Yes, we all understand that. It is complete grace, unmerited favor, and expression of God's goodness, not our goodness, that Jesus died for us. But you better believe he sees us as valuable. You better believe he sees us. Look, we're created in his image, and his designs for us are very deep and very beautiful. And the picture that you have in Luke 15 of the prodigal son, yes, this is talking about a believer that falls away, but how does the father feel? He yearns for that child to be back. So God created us perfect and upright. Then we went out and sinned and have done evil, and we are rebels in his sight. And yet he sees the great value of the human race. He puts a high price on it, even fallen, unsaved human beings, that if there's bloodshed, that the only thing that pays for that bloodshed is the blood of the one who shed it, because the blood is precious, because that's the blood of human life. The way God speaks with esteem and care for all of his creation, that you can't be abusive to human beings and things like that, is because of the intrinsic value of a human being created in God's image. Genesis 9:6, whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, because in the image of God man was made. So even fallen human beings are created in his image. And John 1, that it is God's light and life, that is the life of every human being. So of course we're valuable in his sight. If you said that God sent his son to die for us because we were so good and we just got confused a little and he wanted to help us back on our path, now that is utterly and completely wrong and false. But I affirm that Jesus sees something valuable in us, even as lost, sinful rebels. He sees us created in the image of God. He knows God's destiny and purpose for us, and therefore,
yes, sir,
he loves us. Absolutely, no
sir.
question.
Thank you for that response. And if you don't mind, why is it that the typical? I'm not trying to pick on them or anything like that, but why do they come off as very arrogant? I mean, in my experiences, sir, that's what I've experienced from the most of them.
I mean, listen. And I'm just jumping in, Eugene, because I got a break coming up, and I didn't mean to cut you off there. But the fact of the matter is that we all have our bad tendencies, each group. And in my reform years, that played in with an arrogance in my life, 77 to 82. I thought, I have the Orthodox doctrine. I know. I've been enlightened. So it is very peculiar, but I've seen that. But look, if you're going to scrutinize each group, each has kind of a unique strength and unique weakness. So let's each examine ourselves and start there. Hey, God bless, Eugene. Thanks for the call. I want to present to you a unique way that you can partner together with me to reach Jewish people with the good news of Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah. Hey, Paul wrote that the gospel is to the Jew first, but many of us don't know how to reach the Jewish people with the gospel. Can I tell you, we have a unique open door, and Jewish people are ready to hear, but we need your help. When I was in Israel recently, my last hour in Jerusalem, about a dozen different people came up to me, and they wanted to thank me for the impact of our message. One Jewish woman came up to me, a believer in Jesus. She said, "You saved my son's life. He was falling away. He was getting pulled by other objections to Jesus. He read your material. He's back in the faith." A young man came up to me. He said he and his Orthodox Jewish friends, here he is, I mean, with the yarmulke, the head covering, the traditional Jewish outfit, he said he and his Jewish friends, his Orthodox friends, watch my debates with rabbis. A few years ago, I was able to lead a Holocaust survivor to faith in Jesus. He was a brilliant man, an atheist who had fled the Holocaust. He read my books on answering Jewish objections to Jesus, came to faith, led his wife to the Lord before they left this world. Friends, we have the resources. We have books ready to be translated in Hebrew to be distributed in Israel. We have our Real Messiah website, unique for reaching Jewish people, Orthodox Jews with the gospel, ready to be translated in Hebrew, ready to do internet campaigns to get into every home in Israel. Every cell phone in Israel can have this message, but we need your help. Every gift to our ministry will literally help us reach another Jewish person with the good news of Jesus the Messiah. Go to AskDrBrown.org. AskDrBrown.org, and when you go there, we will partner together to bring salvation to Israel and the Jewish people. Together, we're making a great difference.
Now is the time to reach the lost sheep of the house of Israel, to share in this end-time harvest of Jewish souls, and to find out how to receive this 2-DVD set, Predestination, Election, and the Will of God Debate. Go to AskDrBrown.org.
Spiritual Revolution. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks, friends, for joining us on the Line of Fire, 866-34-TRUTH. Let's go to Sims in McAllen, Texas. Thanks for calling the Line of Fire.
Thank you, Dr. Brown, for taking my call. God bless you.
God bless you.
I want to follow up on a response you gave to about the Ten Commandments a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going through the book of Exodus right now, and I guess I'm wanting to know an additional perspective, because when I research it, I see that the Ten Commandments is often used. It's used in a lot of the catechism, along with the Lord's Prayer and the Apostles' Creed, as a method of teaching.
Yeah.
Many of the Ten Commandments are repeated in the New Testament, like in Romans 13 and Ephesians 6. So I guess my question is would it be right to say that, yes, the Ten Commandments are part of the Sinai Covenant and we as believers are not under the Sinai Covenant, but at the same time, they do represent universal truths from the heart of God that we ought to govern our lives by?
Yeah, Sims, I love the way you asked the question. And it is fascinating when we think of it, because the Ten Commandments explicitly call for a seventh-day Sabbath, right? But when it's been used in church catechisms, it's been used in the context of a Sunday Sabbath, an eighth-day Sabbath, right? So that's the thing that's so fascinating, that the church changed the meaning of the Sabbath, but kept the commandment. So that opens up a massive question, doesn't it, about, well, if you're going to hold the Ten Commandments and have them in a catechetical form, then shouldn't you be celebrating the seventh-day Sabbath? I think you could make an excellent case for that, actually. So that, in other words, if you're going to say Sabbath is mandatory, then it would be seventh day versus Sunday. It would be Saturday versus Sunday. So I instead would argue that we're looking at universal truths, as you said, and that the Sabbath command now in a New Testament context can be interpreted in terms of the rest that we find in the Lord, or the importance of setting aside a day to honor him. But the question is, then why are we quoting it in the form, if you quote it in the full form from the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter, that it's speaking explicitly of a seventh day? So that's why I have no problem with Christians who say that we believe Sabbath is important, but it never changed from the seventh day. I agree, it hasn't. But I also understand that as the church grew and now included Gentile believers as well as Jews, and many living in a context where there was not a 7-day work week and things like that. You may have had a 10-day work week or whatever, but Saturday was not a potential day of rest, that there was an understanding that this is not given now in a binding way the way it was to Israel. So there are principles we learned from it, but it's not given in a binding way in the New Testament. But Sims, I don't think most Christians have really thought through the questions that you're raising, but they're important to think through. I'm sure you agree with that.
Yes, I do, and I'm just because I'm preparing, because I'm only in Exodus chapter 6 now, so I've got a little ways to go, but I've been preparing us, okay, how am I going to approach, dealing and speaking with the people about the 10 Commandments? And you gave me some helpful clarification, because I hadn't yet even thought about, okay, well, how do I address the command of the Sabbath?
Yeah, and what you'll see, sir, when you get to Exodus 16 is the first mention of the Sabbath in Exodus. And the Israelites, what's this? Oh, well, this is Sabbath, and so on. So obviously, if they knew about it before, they certainly didn't know about it. It became lost in slavery in Egypt. And the Egyptians weren't giving them the seventh day off. In fact, the Sabbath command was like, what? Are you serious? So, 1 day off? You don't work? Everybody stops? That's incredible. That was amazing news. And then, of course, in the 10 Commandments in the 20th chapter, but then you'll see it again reiterated several other times in Exodus, and part of it in a distinct way as a sign, a covenantal sign between God and Israel. Thank you for asking. 866-34-TRUTH. Let's go to Robert in New York. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
How's it going, Dr. Brown? It's nice to speak to you again.
Thank you.
I have a really quick question. I was just recently listening to a podcast of one of the ex-Westboro Baptist Church. I'm sure you've heard of them before.
Oh, yeah.
And she had been talking about how she'd left the church, but in general left the faith altogether.
Yeah.
Not just that particular church. And one of the things she brought up was Romans 9. The reason why she stopped believing was God gives mercy to some, and at some, she was reading the passage as some people are created for wrath. Like God intentionally did that and then punishes them.
Right.
In that aspect of like they have no control over it. I just wanted to know what you thought about the Romans 9 and how it reads.
Yeah, first the broader issue, when people have a wrong theology, it can often cause them to leave the faith entirely. In other words, rather than think, okay, the faith is true, God is true, the word is true, Jesus is Lord, but I had some wrong understandings, they associate their wrong understandings with the whole system. Or someone gets abused by a spiritual leader, and because of that, they leave the church because that leader represented God to them. So these things happen, and they're casualties, and that's very, very sad when it happens. Romans 9, Paul is certainly saying God has the right to do that. In other words, if he wants to, as God, he certainly can do that. And human beings don't have the right to argue with him. There's a what if. What if God determined to do that? But you have to keep reading. You read through Romans 9, 10, 11 to get to the point where it says God has consigned all men over to unbelief, to disobedience. Why? That he may have mercy on them all. That's the fundamental message of the cross, that we've all chosen sin, we're all guilty, and yet God in his love has reached out to have mercy on all. And Romans 9 is talking more about calling to service than calling to salvation. And when God hardens Pharaoh's heart, when you actually go through and start reading in Exodus 3 and read through the entire account right up through Exodus 14, you'll see that Pharaoh hardens his own heart over and over and over and over. And then God, in the Hebrew, there's 3 different verbs that are used that are now progressively intense, that God gives Pharaoh, confirms him in his sin, and then even further, and then God actively hardens. So you don't see in Scripture where someone is earnestly seeking God or wanting to please God, and God says, you know what? I'm going to damn you just to do it because I'm God. And I'm just going to create out of the womb for destruction because I'm God. I know that John Calvin.
Is that similar?
John Calvin said that
already knowing that it's in their heart, and that's why he's hardening it because it's already there.
Yeah. In other words, there's no instance in Scripture where, and I know Calvin, I started to say, says that some are doomed from the womb to destruction. And my Calvinist friends affirm that. I do not see that as scriptural at all.
Nor do I.
For many, many reasons, with all respect to Calvin and to my Calvinist friends. But, yeah, look, here's the deal. You read in Genesis, the 20th chapter, with King Abimelech, that he takes in Sarah thinking that she's Abraham's sister, and he's planning to sleep with her. Now, nothing gets consummated ultimately, and basically everybody gets just kind of frozen in terms of the ability to reproduce in his household there, or in his palace. But God says, I saw your heart. In other words, you didn't know that she was another man's wife, and because of that, I kept you from sinning against me. So yes, certainly. Okay. You see consistently the judgment and the justice of God, that he's not arbitrary in any way. Hey, Robert, thank you much for the call, and may God bring that woman to true salvation. 866-34-TRUTH. We go to Rebecca in Brooklyn. Welcome to the Line of Fire.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Brown.
Hey.
Happy to be here. My question is just about relating to the Trinity.
Yeah.
With my understanding, it may be just my simple-mindedness, but I found it to be a bit like of a conflict. Like when God was hiding his face from Moses in Exodus 33, because he said, if you see my face, you would die.
Yeah.
And I also compare those to the other pre-incarnate appearances of God in the Old Testament. And people not dying, they were like, I've seen God, but I have not died, like Gideon and Jacob and etc. And also compare that to the New Testament where Jesus says God is spirit, and also like in Luke 24 he says you see me, I'm not. You can touch me, I'm not spirit, but I'm flesh.
Yeah.
So it kind of confused me because with Moses he's seeing a back and with their hands being described.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's just anthropomorphic language or it kind of confused me because to say that God has a face the Father rather.
Yep.
It kind of confused me. Okay.
Yeah, sure. So Rebecca, first thing, there's nothing simple-minded about your questions. These are great questions, and even knowing the concepts of anthropomorphic issues and things like that. God being described in human terms. No, it's great questions. So let me give you the big picture first. God is spirit, but spirit does not mean just like wind. Because God is spirit, so he exists in another plane, but it's a very real plane. In other words, God is a visible being with characteristics, but he exists in another plane. Jesus, coming into this world, takes on a flesh body and then rises from the dead in a glorified body. So that is unique to him, all right? But God is a tangible, visible being with features of God. That's why not? In other words, spirit doesn't mean you're just like, why can't there be images associated with God? If we're made in his image, is it only spiritual image or does it go beyond that? Either way, we know that God's being described in human terms, but do the human terms reflect who God is in terms of his being? All right, what about can't see him, can't see him? We'll take that up when we come back. Did God harden Pharaoh's heart? Well, yes, of course. The biblical text is quite explicit that God did that, but is that the whole story? Did Pharaoh also harden his heart? Did God confirm Pharaoh in his hardness before further hardening and stiffening his heart? What does the Hebrew say? What's the chronology? Well, let's take a look in Exodus chapter 4, verse 21. God speaking to Moses, and there we read, the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I've put in your power, but I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. You say, well, there it tells us flat out, God will harden his heart so he won't let the people go. Okay, if we go back to the 3rd chapter, I'm looking at verse 19, look it up. You see that God tells Moses, this is the 3rd chapter, so before what we just read, God tells him, I'm sure that the king of Egypt, I'm sure that Pharaoh will not let you go. Then start reading through the account. And you'll see 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, over and over. And Pharaoh hardens his heart. Pharaoh hardens his heart. Pharaoh hardens his heart. Pharaoh hardens his heart. In other words, his will, his sin, his evil, his stubbornness. This is the very reason that God raised up a wicked man to be in that position at that time. All right, he didn't raise up a God-fearing man and then harden his heart and turn him away. He didn't raise up a humble man looking to the Lord for help and then harden his heart and turn him away. Rather, he raised up a wicked man with a wicked heart, and Pharaoh over and again says, no, 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 no. His pride, his rebellion, no, no, no. Then the first thing it says is that God strengthens his heart. That's the first Hebrew word that's used for harden. Okay, it is literally to strengthen. So God now, as Pharaoh's reaping what he sows and God's bringing judgment on him, he's strengthening him in his own sinful resolve. And then the next one is making his heart heavy in that sense. And then the last one, he's making it harsh or hard. In other words, there is a progression. As Pharaoh sins, as Pharaoh hardens his heart, as Pharaoh says no to God, God says, all right, I'm going to confirm you in your sin. You are sinning, you're rebelling. I'm going to confirm you in your sin and rebellion. I'm going to make your heart even harder. I'm going to make it now so this is your resolve to sin. I am backing your resolve to sin. And so, again, it's not God taking someone and saying, God, help me. God, I need help. I have mercy. I want to do the right thing, but I need help. And God says, I'm going to harden you. Rather, God is, yes, he does harden. He does stiffen. He does do this to Pharaoh's heart. But number one, Pharaoh does it first. God says first that Pharaoh will do it. And number two, it is progressive, a strengthening of Hebrew in terms of what happens. This is the result of sin, and God did what was right.
It's The Line of Fire with your host, Dr. Michael Brown, your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks, friends, for joining us on the broadcast. Another reminder, join me in Orlando, Florida this weekend. All the details on my itinerary, AskDrBrown.org. And less than 10 seats left on our Israel trip. So if you're planning on coming with us in May, now is the time to register, right? You've got questions, we've got answers. So Rebecca in Brooklyn, how is it that God is seen and unseen? Exodus 24, they saw the God of Israel. Exodus 33, no one will see my face and live. How does that work? Well, John 1:18, it says this, no one has seen God at any time, but the one and only God who's in the bosom of the Father, he has made him known. 1 Timothy 6, Paul writes that God dwells in unapproachable light. No one has seen him or can see him. And yet Jesus says in John 14, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So that's how it works. It is the role of the Son to make the Father known. Colossians 1, he is the image of the invisible God. Hebrews 1, he is the very stamp of his character, the shining forth of his being. So the Father dwells in unapproachable light. No one can see him and live. The Son is the one who makes him known, and the Spirit works invisibly to draw all attention to the Son, who then draws attention to the Father, and one God is all in all. So I hope that is helpful for you in your understanding. 866-34-TRUTH. I'm going back to the phones in one moment. There's a Facebook question asking, I hear all this about angel boards and tarot cards and Christians. How do these things go together? Okay, first, the only reason we're hearing a lot about it is because practices of like one group in one place got a ton of attention. All right, I've never run into this myself in all of my travels, but from what I understand is not tarot cards. Rather, it was scripture cards or cards that would get the attention of people that are into all this new age stuff, but with scripture truths and with ways just, or maybe about moods and things like that, and say, hey, you want to sit down, we want to pray for you, or would you like a reading? They've said it like that to get the person to sit down and just try to interact with them and then give them a reading. Basically, you need Jesus, you're a lost sinner, you need to be saved. Now, whether it's a good technique or bad, whether it's a mixture, all I know about is the little I just told you, that much. It may be crazy, far out, ridiculous, stay away from it. It may be, good idea, but you're playing with fire. Or it might be, oh, what a creative way to preach the gospel. I don't know more about it, but this is not some phenomenon that I've heard about. It's widespread. All right, let us go to Tony in Louisiana. Welcome to the Line of Fire. Hello, Tony. Tony's not there. Tony wanted to ask me about my personal devotional practices. Obviously, the foundations of everything are prayer and the Word. In my earlier days in the Lord, when I was saved, a year or two, I would spend at least 6 or 7 hours alone with God every single day. I would read the Word 2 hours. I would memorize Scripture for 1 hour, and I would memorize 20 verses a day. I would pray requests and other things and pray for my own heart and life. That would be over 2 hours. I'd pray in tongues at least an hour a day. So I'd pray at least 3 hours, be in the Word at least 3 hours. I had a very free high school schedule, was able to do that. It's been very rare in my life over the years since then that I've had that kind of time. There are times when I just go away, and I've spent up to a week just alone and spend the vast majority of every day praying and in the Word. For special times of just meeting with God and getting renewed. And there are times that I'll pull away and just spend those hours and hours seeking Him. But otherwise, I will be studying lots of different things in Scripture, then periodically do a plan to just read through the whole Bible again as kind of a refresher. The fastest is the Bible in 90 days, but that's just you're getting it in front of you again. But then I'm always studying, digging. I may be working heavily in a particular book or particular aspects of things, but you always want to be reading the Word spiritually for growth, for strength, for edification, and not just studying subjects. All right. As far as my prayer life, I pray at different times of different days. Ideally, it is not best to follow my example. Ideally, it is best to have set times every day when this is my time. I pray, get in the Word foundationally, and to start the day is the best way to do it. I've been a late night person almost all my life, and as the years have gone on, it's gotten more extreme, not less extreme. So many, many, many times I'm just getting going at midnight. Okay, just getting going at midnight, and then I am 2, 3, 4, maybe 4 in the morning, 5, okay, I got to turn in. And so I spend a lot of time in prayer late and a lot of time studying late. But when I'm home and not traveling, because my schedule is so wild in that regard, I'll really try to start the day in a quality way, meet with the Lord, pour out my heart. I do pray in tongues a lot. Often it turns to groaning of intercession and great burden. Then out of that, praying with my understanding. And then out of that, praying for specific needs, specific situations, and people. And then all through the course of the day, there's prayer, and there's thinking about the Word, or listening to the Bible, or being in the Word, kind of like an ongoing thing all through the day. So hopefully that's helpful for you as well. 866-34-TRUTH. Let us go to Michael in California. Welcome to the Line of Fire. Hello, Michael. All right, I guess you're not. Now, I would answer your question about the Tetragrammaton, but I don't know exactly what it would have been. I guess you couldn't hold. So we'll go over to Luke in Israel. Where in Israel are you, sir? Hello, Luke. Oh, man, what's happened to our callers? All right, I was eager to talk to you, Luke, about Daniel 7:27, but guess not. All right, we go to Josh in L.A. Welcome to the Line of Fire. All right. Tell you what, it looks like people are there, but I'm not hearing them. Apparently, because I got a full board of callers here. Let's tell you what, I'm just gonna try one more, just to see. Brett in Charlotte, welcome to the Line of Fire. Okay.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, Brett. Nice to talk to you. We finally get a voice on the other side. All right. Yes. What's up? What's up, sir?
I was just wondering,
I had a question about, how certain people in the world will be in terrible situations. And that's all they'll know their whole life, and they'll die homeless and things like that.
Yeah.
So, how does that tie into God having a plan for everyone?
Yeah. So let's look at it a few different ways. There's one way, which would be the Calvinistic understanding, which would say, God has a plan for everyone, but for some it's heaven, and for some it's hell. For some it is damnation, and maybe just a terrible life, or maybe a rich life and damnation, and for others salvation and grace. So that's it. That's one way of looking at it. God does have a plan for everyone. Some of the plans we like, some we don't like. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that God has an ideal plan for everyone, but many times because of our sin or our disobedience, we don't experience that ideal. And certainly Scripture is full of examples like that, of God saying, I wanted to do this, but you did this. I intended to do this, but you did this. My plan was to bless, but you did this, and therefore you came under judgment. But I would look at it in the bigger way and say that ultimately God has made provision through the cross for every human being to know him and be with him forever and ever and ever, which is 1,000,000,000 times more important than being homeless or destitute in this world. In fact, for the most part, you find more openness to the gospel among the poor than among the rich. And the parable of the rich man and Lazarus illustrates again, you may have much in this world, but nothing in the world to come. And James, Jacob, the 2nd chapter, asks, has not God chosen the poor of this world, rich in faith, to be heirs of the kingdom? And the 5th chapter says it's often the rich who are wicked and under divine judgment. So I would say that many of those who are first will be last. Many who had the least in this world will have the most in the world to come. There are brothers and sisters that I work with in India, people that have very, very little in this world, but are very, very rich spiritually. So I do believe that God's desire is for all people to know him and be with him forever, and that we see the plan of God unfolding through the gospel. So we need to extend that to everyone, that if Jesus is lifted up, he draws all people to himself. So we see that foundationally, and then it's up to us to give that invitation to all. So the adage of starting with telling someone Jesus loves you and has a plan for your life as the first word of the gospel, I understand many don't see that as scriptural or wouldn't do it in that way. But if I'm seeing someone, talking to them, I have no question whatsoever that God desires that person's salvation, and God desires that that person will be with him forever, and that God has a plan where that person's life will bear fruit for the gospel, be it through hard times in this world or good times in this world. I feel sure about that. And I could tell someone, everyone I look in the eye, that God has a plan for their lives, and that God's desire is that they are with him forever, and that their lives bear fruit for his glory in this world and forever. I feel very confident of that. So hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So if I can follow up on it. So you're saying that even if they do have a plan, people can still sin and stray off that path themselves.
Yes, sir. We see that over and over in Scripture.
And then, so they'll stray off that path, and that's not directly correlated to their wealth or anything. That's just how.
Yeah.
That's just how they are. Like they're judged just by how much their worth is. So even if they're suffering down here, it's not about their current presence; it's about their long-term afterlife presence.
Right. The ultimate goal is that we become conformed to the image of Jesus, that we spend eternity with God, glorifying him and enjoying him. That's the ultimate destiny. But even in this world, you can have very little outwardly and be super abundantly blessed. And you can have a lot outwardly and be spiritually impoverished. So there's not always a direct correlation. Hey, thank you for the question. All right, looks like we've reconnected with some of our other callers. We'll get back to them momentarily. We'll start in Israel, in Los Angeles, South Carolina, much time as we have.
Is the Nicene Creed
Did God harden
biblical?
Pharaoh's heart? Well, yes,
Well,
of
if you
course.
mean
The
that
biblical
it
text is
affirms
quite
faith in God's
explicit
eternal
that God
triunity,
did
yes,
that.
it
But
is biblical.
is that
If you
the
mean,
whole
does it
story?
affirm
Did
the
Pharaoh
deity of the
also
Father, the
harden his
deity of
heart?
the Son, the
Did
deity
God
of the Spirit?
confirm
Yes,
Pharaoh
certainly
in
it is
his
biblical.
hardness
And
before
we see a statement
further
in Paul's
hardening
writings,
and
for example,
stiffening
in
his
2
heart?
Corinthians
What does the
chapter
Hebrew say?
13,
What's the
verse
chronology?
14,
Well, let's
where
take
he
a look
brings this
in Exodus
benediction.
chapter
The
4,
grace
verse
of the Lord Jesus
21.
Christ,
God speaking to
the love of
Moses,
God,
and there we read,
and the
the Lord said to
fellowship
Moses, when you
of the
go
Holy
back
Spirit
to
be
Egypt,
with
see
you
that you
all.
do
So
before
there is a
Pharaoh all the
benediction,
miracles that I've
including
put in your
Jesus,
power, but I will
including the
harden
Father,
his heart
including
so that he
the
will
Spirit.
not let
So
the
we
people
understand
go.
God's
You say, well,
triunity.
there it
We
tells us
understand
flat
Jesus
out,
saying,
God will harden his
"Baptize in
heart
the
so he
name
won't
of
let the
Father,
people go.
Son,
Okay.
and Spirit. We
If we
see
go
those
back to the
things in
third
Scripture.
chapter, I'm looking at
That
verse
being said,
19. Look
the
it up.
Nicene
You see
Creed
that God
seeks to
tells
bring a
Moses,
philosophical
this is the third chapter,
explanation
so
using
before
the
what we just
philosophical
read,
terms
God
and
tells him,
concepts
I'm
of
sure
the day
that the king of Egypt,
and the
I'm
world in
sure
which
that
this was
Pharaoh
formed.
will not let
so
you
in
go.
that sense, it
Then
goes
start
way
reading through the
beyond
account,
Scripture.
and you'll see one
It
time,
speaks
two
of things
times, three times,
in ways
four
that
times,
Scripture
over
does
and over,
not,
and Pharaoh hardens
because
his
there were
heart. Pharaoh
theological
hardens his heart.
controversies
Pharaoh hardens his
that were
heart.
being
Pharaoh
battled,
hardens his heart. In
and
other
there were
words, his
nuances
will,
of
his sin,
interpretations that
his
were at
evil,
stake,
his
and there were
stubbornness.
deep,
This is the
deep,
very
deep
reason that God
divisions within the
raised up
church.
a wicked
So in
man
that
to be in that
sense, it
position
goes
at
way
that
beyond
time. All right,
what
he didn't raise up
Scripture
a
states
God-fearing man
plainly.
and then
And it
harden
seeks
his
to
heart and turn him
clarify
away.
what
He didn't raise
exactly
up a
does it
humble
mean
man
that
looking to the
Jesus
Lord
the
for
Son
help
is
and then
begotten
harden
of
his
the
heart and
Father.
turn him away.
In what way
Rather,
is
he
God
raised up a
triune?
wicked
It
man
seeks
with a
to put
wicked heart,
philosophical
and Pharaoh
terms on
over and
something that the
again
Bible
says,
does not
no,
address
no,
philosophically.
no,
In that
no, his
sense,
pride, his
it goes
rebellion.
way
No,
beyond
no.
Scripture.
Then,
in terms
the
of
first thing it
affirming
says is
scriptural
that
truths,
God
the eternal
strengthens his heart.
deity
That's
of
the
the
first
Father,
Hebrew word
Son,
that's
and
used for
Spirit,
harden.
and God's
Okay,
eternal
it is
triunity.
literally
Yes,
to
in that
strengthen.
sense, it's biblical.
So
In
God
another sense,
now, as
especially
Pharaoh's reaping what he
philosophically, it
sows,
goes
and
way
God's bringing
beyond
judgment on him,
biblical
he's
language.
strengthening him in his own sinful resolve. And then
It's The Line of Fire with your host, activist, author, international speaker, and theologian, Dr. Michael Brown. Your voice of moral, cultural, and spiritual revolution. Get into The Line of Fire now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
thanks, friends, for joining us on the Line of Fire. 866-34-TRUTH is the number to call. All right, we go over to Israel. Hey, Luke, where in Israel are you?
I'm in the Judean Hill Country.
Okay.
I don't know the exact area. I'm not too familiar with it, but it's like a Bible extension program for my university back in California.
Oh, sweet. Excellent. So glad you're able to do it.
Yeah. Thanks, man, for taking my call.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had a question about Daniel chapter 7, verse 27.
Mm-hmm.
When it talks about in the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High.
Mm-hmm.
Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him.
Yes.
Referring to the Most High, or do you know if the underlying Aramaic should be serve him, referring to the Most High, or serve and obey them, referring to the saints?
Yes, there is a dispute among translators, and often in Jewish interpretation. So the Aramaic there, v'chol sheltanaya lay yiflechun. So the word lay there does that. It means to him, certainly to him or to it. So it is often taken in Jewish interpretation to be referring to the people, but to me it's very, very evident based on what we read earlier in the text about the Son of Man and his exaltation and the exaltation of the Messiah, that it's not talking about the people, but rather the Messiah himself. You could say the Most High, but because it's given to him, who's it given to? It's given to the Son of Man, the exalted messianic figure. So it doesn't say conspicuously to them, right? But rather to him. So that's how I would render it. And if I'm just looking quickly at different translations, the New Jewish Publication Society, which would take it in the sense that it's referring to the people, the kingship and dominion and grandeur belonging to all the kingdoms in heaven will be given to the people of the Holy Ones, the Most High. Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom. All dominion shall serve and obey them. I wouldn't read it like that. I would read it as in the NET. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. All authorities will serve him and obey him. So either speaking about the Most High or speaking about the Messiah to whom the kingdom is given. Certainly not to the people.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, appreciate the. Yeah, go ahead.
I was actually going to ask you one more question, if that's okay with you, man.
Sure.
I was going to ask about, so I know like Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 are kind of similar, talking about the four kingdoms, and then it talks about like God setting up his kingdom.
Yes.
In Daniel 2 through the stone, like Daniel 7 through the Son of Man. Do you take that, like setting up the kingdom in the days of those kings, to be referring back to Christ's first coming?
Yes, sir. Yes, because the Roman Empire is standing, and here this rock comes and strikes at the feet, and the whole thing crumbles. In fact, that's a good verse, the end of Daniel 2, to point to the Messiah had to come during that time, during the time of the Roman Empire, during the time of its prominence. And then that small stone, just that rock, now causes everything else to crumble. So yes, that's definitely how I interpret that. That's the foundation of the kingdom, and then Daniel 7, the culmination of the kingdom with the Lord's return in the clouds and coming in power. Great question, sir. Thank you so much. 866-34-TRUTH. Reconnect with Michael in California. Ready for your question, sir.
Hi, Dr. Brown. My question is specifically about the Tetragrammaton.
Yep.
And I've heard at least one Hebrew professor and multiple YouTubers, which YouTubers can kind of be a mixed bag sometimes, but they've said that the ancient Hebraic symbols actually meant behold the hand, behold the nail.
Forget it.
Which sounds too good to be true, but then again, all prophecy is too good to be true, really.
You will not find a bona fide Hebrew scholar arguing for that.
Okay.
What you need to do is go to my YouTube channel, Ask Dr. Brown, or my website, askdrbrown.org, and just type in the word paleo, and we completely destroy this myth that the pictographs, first, that you can definitively say that that's what the pictographs meant, that this actually means behold, or something like that, that the hey actually means that for sure. That's highly disputed in terms of the original meaning. But the pictographs no longer had a pictographic meaning once they became part of an alphabetic script. So for example, the aleph, the ox and ox head, the only meaning it had now was not that picture, but rather the sound of the aleph, which is more of a non spoken sound, or for bayit, house. The only meaning it had was b. So you took the first letter, so that now with just like 22 letters, you could get all the sounds that you needed. Pictographs, you need thousands and thousands and thousands. The idea that you could have language being conveyed with 22 pictures is completely bogus. And that's why the letters change so quickly, because they no longer had pictographic meaning, so they get simplified in their forms. But just type in the word paleo, and you will have in detail, with lots of examples, specifics, pictures, and things like that, complete demolition of the. Do you remember, you said a Hebrew scholar you heard it from, do you remember who that was?
It was actually someone who taught at a school in my neighborhood. It was one of my youth who was going to school, like taking a Hebrew class in college, and I had him ask the Hebrew professor, and they said, yeah, that's awesome, that's true.
Yeah, at most, first, it may not have been a real scholar, just someone teaching Hebrew at a college, but at most, the person would have been saying, yeah, the original pictographs would have meant that, but it has no meaning once it becomes an alphabetic script. That's all. Just like, for example, our English letter A comes from ultimately the same Hebrew Phoenician script for the ox head. Okay, it comes from Phoenician into Greek into Latin into English. Or B, our letter B, that's same from bayit, house. So our letters, just like our letters, you can trace them back to those old forms if I show you, but they don't have that meaning. Okay, that it's all lost. But anyway, if you watch Paleo, is just search for that, and we explain the myth of the Paleo Hebrew script. There's an ancient script called Paleo, but that's all it is, just an ancient script. Josh in Los Angeles, glad to reconnect with you. Your question, sir.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure
Appreciate
thing.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Los Angeles, and my question is regarding the late Kobe Bryant. It's pretty sad over here in Los Angeles with sports.
Yeah, of
And
course.
things of his passing and stuff. But my question is very controversial among my friends and Christian friends and whatnot. And it's basically, it might be a two-part, but just basically like, what are your thoughts on like whether or not Kobe Bryant is in heaven or hell? And before you answer or respond, like it's just because the reason I ask is because a lot of my friends who are Christians, and some of them are strong ones, are so quick to put him in heaven because they loved him so much and said he's a devout Catholic and a good family man. But in the 20 years living here and, hardcore Laker fan, watching him even before I was saved and even after I was saved, like I never heard him mention Jesus once or anything like that. And so basically, I'm not saying he's in heaven or hell, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Because, we're so quick to use our emotions and put people in heaven or hell based on what we felt. I don't know. I just wanted to call and ask your opinion about that.
Bottom line, we don't know. We have no idea whatsoever, and we have no right to speculate because we do not know. So, for example, was there sexual immorality in his past, adultery in his past? Yeah, allegedly a good amount. Was that his lifestyle to this day or to the day of his death? Or did he turn away from that? Was he a devoted husband and father? Was he a Catholic just out of religious tradition? Or despite certain errors within Catholicism, did he really know the Lord and have a private relationship with the Lord? That's why he was, the week he died, he and his daughter had communion, or was it the day of their death? So only God knows. That's the bottom line. If I see someone die, and to their dying breath, they are rejecting God, they are cursing God, they are saying they don't believe, or to their dying breath, they are professing faith in Islam or something like that, then I say they're lost. But even someone who, until an hour before they died, I knew them to be lost, I don't know what happened in the last hour. And even though it's rare, there are people that cry out for mercy in the end. True story about the Titanic, that there was a guy on the ship that was preaching the gospel. And then even as he was drowning and those were drowning, he kept preaching until he drowned. How many people got saved at the last minute? We simply don't know. I've heard of planes that went down, and you find out that there was a fiery evangelist on the plane, and they knew they were going to crash. It's like, I wouldn't surprise me if that person was up there preaching. So it's what we must do, Josh, is examine our own lives to make sure we're in right relationship with God, and then take every opportunity we have to share the gospel with others, because none of us knows how long that we have. None of us at all. And therefore, let us do our best to share the good news with others and realize the sobriety, the intensity of there are 9 people on their way to basketball game and they're gone. Moms, dads, kids, gone. No one expected it. Happens every day of every week. May God have mercy. May he use us to reach many. Thank you for the call. All right, friends, back with you live from Orlando on Monday.